Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Lore Lords, episode 42. Wow, 42. Man,
We made it.
It's been a long road, and I'm glad we're here. But we're talking about another, spoopy, scary, cryptid thingy, vampires. And Atlas is bringing it to us once again.
Big hiss, big fang. This is a much anticipated episode, actually.
Are we going to talk about Vlad the Impaler at all?
Yes. Yeah, we will. 3 people in real life have said, when's the vampire episode coming to me? So I guess there's some people wanting to listen to this one.
All right.
Especially since I brought it up in the werewolf episode quite a bit. We talked about it because they're related, you know.
That's true. That is true.
So we're going on that level of stuff. But like the werewolf episode, there's, some truth. Some true stuff,
Right.
some true crime stuff that happened. This is not nearly as graphic as the werewolf serial killer stuff we covered.
Well,
It's that stuff
the
was
Impaler's kind of...
Yeah, I mean we could talk
whole
that,
thing
that he's going to be at the very end actually. But I just mean like there's real life vampire like record encounters, right? Just like the werewolf ones we covered in the werewolf episode. But the werewolf ones are people who are serial killers generally.
Right.
Like when we described someone eating pregnant women, you know what I mean? Like that was gross.
That's pretty graphic. You're right.
And the vampire stuff is not like that. It's not serial killers. It's interesting. There's a difference. But there's a lot to go over, and I think a lot of people know what vampires are. Like it's they're probably the most
multicultural, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's a big. Most of this episode, I think, is my vampires around the world section.
Oh, great.
We go over every part of every continent we're going to cover.
I keep spoiling things by accident.
Yeah, that's fine. We're build the hype up for it.
Right.
Yeah, vampires probably the most popular monster, I would say, worldwide. Yeah. Like maybe next to the ghost. Yeah, zombie, ghost, vampire. Like I think they're all kind of equally spread. But as far as like movie prominence and like book prominence, I think vampires probably take the thing. They're present in pretty much every genre imaginable. We got sexy vampires. We got
a lot of sexy vampires.
And then we have the opposite end of the spectrum with horrifying, gruesome vampires.
Yeah, and then the ones in the middle.
There's ones in the middle, yeah. Like Dracula.
All right.
Like Dracula's...
Marceline, the vampire queen.
Yeah. You don't know what that is, but Dracula is a pretty like middle ground horror level. You know what I mean? He's usually kind of like a cool dude, I guess. Like he's kind of like chill.
Yeah. He's kind of like if the Great Gatsby was a vampire.
Exactly. So this worldwide phenomenon of vampires is pretty dark and bloody, But what is a vampire? If you really don't know, we can talk about that real quick. And while it is a pretty complicated question, which we're going to get into, in general, vampires, in the most common use of the term, is an individual who receives a curse or infection that transforms them into a monster known as a vampire. They usually get this by being bit by another vampire. Vampires are people who need to drink blood to survive. They're usually allergic to sunlight. This is either fatally or just bothersome to them. Depends on the source. Vampires are often attractive, and they look like their best self. So like if you're an old person bit by a vampire, you usually age down into your like peak, usually. Sometimes they're also, however, not looking attractive, and they are monsters with giant wings and claws, and more like Nosferatu looking style things happen occasionally. Some vampires will have no reflection. That's a common thing as well. And some vampires are weakened by holy symbols. Some vampires are able to turn into bats or wolves or go invisible. So, there's that.
Wow.
And that's our first connection to werewolves, too. They also turn into wolves. It's very common to believe vampires are turned into wolves.
Oh.
A lot of cultures have that in the vampire myth. I think that's part of like the original vampire mythos, is they turn into wolves.
Oh, but then somebody was like, we don't want to mix them up with werewolves
in
the movies. So
yeah, they kind of took that away for that reason, I'm sure.
Just give them to bats.
Yeah, they'll be the bat ones. So yeah, the variations of vampires are pretty vast, and each culture attributes to different vampire media and what their things are in some way. Tonight's episode, I have 4 parts. The first is the history of the vampire. The second is the hysteria of the vampire. And the third is a vampires around the world. And the fourth is Vampires Today. So
That sounds like a TV show.
yeah, that could be. I could make TV shows. Hire me. Part 1, History of the Vampire. So, what do you know, Pat, about where do you think vampires come from? Like, what do you think? What's the earliest version you could think of?
I imagine just like a folklore type story of like seeing somebody drinking somebody else's blood or something and being like, "Oh, what is that?" What? And then somebody being, making shit up.
Yeah, but how far back do you think? Like empire or age wise?
I feel like vampires would be a pretty old fucking thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I imagine they're probably back beyond even like back in those Egypt times and shit.
Oh,
Back in
we're going before Egypt time, baby. Just like Werewolf, actually. We're going to Sumeria, Mesopotamia, Babylon, Assyria, all that kind of stuff. We're going right back there. This is going to be the first thing. So it's also important to note, though, that the term vampire did not exist until the medieval ages.
Sure.
But a lot of things in history have identical traits or features or descriptions as vampires, which has different names. Which is what we're going to start with today. And also, they're commonly referred to as demons in a lot of lore. You know, the demon is just a pretty pop umbrella term for bad things.
Yeah.
So, going as far back as ancient Babylon and Assyria, there's a story of Lilitu. So, Lilitu is a monster that is referred to as a demon who drinks the blood of infants.
Neat.
So, this is the first ever record of a blood drinking creature. Is the Lilitu of ancient Mesopotamia, and we have actually quite a bit of record of this creature because it's depicted in a lot of ancient clay pottery designs and tablets designs. So we have images of her. It's a female demon because it's got boobas, and drinks the blood of infants, usually holding a baby above its head, draining it, kind of thing.
Oh, I've seen pictures of this.
Yeah, you probably have. It's like a very common, old, scary, thing, right?
Yeah.
So we think that the Lilitu was of some kind of significance. We don't actually know what or why. But based on how popular the imagery of her is, it's likely she was either a common, myth to scare children, or either maybe a demon in the same line as, gods and goddesses kind of thing. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of our history and lores and folklores and stuff do come from the simple desire that adults know kids are stupid and will believe anything. We tell them things to shut up.
Tell them to not go outside at night.
Yeah.
The adults know the real danger is people stabbing or abducting your kid.
Right.
And most myths are to not let your kid go outside at night and get stabbed or abducted.
Yeah,
that's unfortunately the boring truth of the matter, most likely. However, today we're going to suspend that belief and go deep into this.
They're real.
Where Lilitu, does that sound a little familiar to another name you might have heard in demonology, Pat?
Lilitu?
Yeah, a little bit like the name Lilith.
Oh, yeah, sure. That's exactly what I thought.
Yeah, exactly. I know you were on the. I knew you as being very familiar with Hebrew demonology.
I love Supernatural.
And Lilith is in that show too. Yes, but so Lilith is a popular creature demon from Hebrew demonology.
Got it. Okay.
Lilith is
pretty name.
Yeah, it is actually a very pretty name. I could see naming a pet or child Lilith pretty easily. It sounds
if you
flowery.
have a shitty cat, name it Lilith.
Yeah, exactly. Because what Lilith is a female demon who drinks a baby's blood. Sound familiar? And have many daughters that do the same thing. So Lilith spreads demons, and Lilith is often described as having large fleshy wings as well.
Well, that's actually isn't that kind of a common vampire trope in lore too? Is the idea that there's it's very matriarchal, where there's a big demon lord mother vampire, and then she has daughters that come and take you, kind of like the Resident Evil game.
Yeah,
I never played
it's usually patriarchal for vampires because vampire lords are a thing in the lore as well.
Like in Skyrim.
Yes, actually, we're going to talk.
All I'm going to do is make references to other things.
That's what vampires are in almost everything. You can,
right? Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. But we are going to talk about vampire lords a little bit because that's an actual part. That's almost different monster than the vampire. But You're right. There's both. It's kind of like how there's like witch covens. There's like vampire like societies, and some of them are patriarchal, like Dracula. But then there's other ones that are like not, and they're it's like like you said, Resident Evil, where it's like a woman based like my daughters kind of thing. And that is the case in Lilith. So maybe it's kind of where it comes from. It's also theorized that the daughter term for Lilith isn't literal. But people who have been infected with her or possessed by her to be servants of her, which sounds a little bit vampire-y to me.
Yes,
vampire-y. So take a little bite in them and spreading it around. But it's unknown if it's a curse or a thing. But her daughters are creatures that need to drink blood. That is the big thing. Ancient Persia. STD. The first STD is vampirism, honest, kind of. Ancient Persia has a similar imagery on pottery and clay shards today as Lilith and Lilitu, but unfortunately we don't have much more information. But we do have similar imagery, so it's likely either just, people spread stories and they got their own version of it. It probably had its own name in ancient Persian, but we just don't simply know what it is now. In ancient India, moving further, we have the Vitalis. This is a ghoul-looking monster who inhabits corpses it either kills or just finds, and then drinks the blood from the inside.
God, that thing sounds more like a fucking... like a undercrawler type thing, like a skinwalker type situation.
Yeah, it's referred to as a ghoul by Hindu people today. And it is just drink blood though, but this myth still exists today in Hinduism. It is so it's kind of hard to call it a myth. It is an actively believed thing, and I don't think they're called that. I tried looking it up. I saw the word Vetas or Vitals as a similar word, but Vitalis is the ancient word for it. I don't know if there's just multiple words for the same thing, but it's kind of a thing. They're known by a lot of cultures today as Indian vampires by Western people. They just say that word, Indian vampire. So that's what they're talking about if you ever hear it.
Okay.
So in Jewish folklore, we have the Estries. These are female, shape-shifting, blood-drinking demons who only go out at night seeking victims, but live amongst people during the day. They are known to break into people's homes by flying into windows where they have fleshy wings on their back, and where they proceed to feed off their blood. The Estries are a pretty feared thing back in the day. There's a lot of writing in ancient early Jewish stuff about Estries and having them running away from them, and a lot of you'll see some things that have to do with stories that have to do with vampire stuff coming from the Middle East, or you'll just see it coming from a desert. It usually relates to this story of the Estries. A lot of people kind of think they're like the original vampires, the more like Nosferatu looking pure monster variant.
Got it.
There's nothing pretty about them.
Scary as hell. Yeah.
The Hebrew word, I'm probably going to butcher this. It's Aluka. I think it's Aluka.
Aluka?
Aluka, or there might be a different way to pronounce it, but Alukha.
Right.
Kah. Sorry, Alukah. Aluka or something. It translates to leech. Is what it means in Hebrew.
Oh.
And it is synonymously used with vampirism and vampires. There's writings of referring to people who don't go out in the daytime as leeches. So that's their way of saying I think they're a vampire kind of thing. It's just the word didn't exist, right? So it's called them leeches.
That's such a mean thing. That's like today is a gamer who doesn't go out during the day.
He has to drink blood. The most detailed description of this appears in a story where the creature is an undead being who can shape change into a wolf, and this wolf can also fly and will eventually die if it has no blood to feed on.
That's a very important part.
Once dead, the creature can be prevented from becoming a demon by being buried with earth stuffed in its mouth.
So just get a pile of dirt and shove it?
You just shove. Okay. You fill its mouth with dirt when you bury a vampire to make sure it dies if you're in Israel, I guess.
That's a pretty reasonable...
It's an easy way to get rid of them, too. It's not you could even... Ritual. You could even give a respectable burial if they were a good person before they were a monster,
Right. Yeah, just make sure the dirt's in there. That's all I gotta do.
Yeah.
Does a rock count? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think so. Doesn't earth mean soil? Literally?
Yeah, but a rock is part of that whole Earth thing, right?
One big rock.
This is digressing.
Anyway, back on topic. Greco-Roman age mythology is no exception to containing vampirism. We see multiple creatures, including the Empusae, the Mormo, the Lamia, and the Striges.
The Empusies? Sorry, go ahead.
Empusae are creatures that resemble vampires, or at least they take part in vampirism. Empusae is actually the daughter of the goddess Hecate. However you want to pronounce it. So her daughter is Empusae, I guess. And she is described as a bronze-footed, demon-looking being.
Okay. Yeah.
But she would disguise herself as a beautiful young woman who would seduce men with her gaze and then drink their blood. She would unveil her embussy and then get the men inside to drink their blood.
Oh, this is great. I'm having a good time. Okay.
So the second one in Greek mythology is the Mormo. This is a female spirit of a woman who ate her own children.
Oh, God.
And it's unclear whether or not this is an individual entity or type of spirit. We don't know. But the Mormo is said to consume the blood of children. The word used is used in ancient Greek writing as like boogeyman or bugbear. Like it's like a word used to like scare people. Like it's like the boogeyman. Don't let the Mormo get you. So we don't know if it's supposed to be like a mythological entity, like how Empusae was like the daughter of a goddess. Mormo could be like a legendary monster like the Minotaur in the Labyrinth. Or it's the spirit of any woman who eats their own kids. I don't know. One of the two. We don't know.
Yeah, like, hey, don't do the sin of eating your own
children. Yeah, don't eat
or
your own
become a
kids.
Mormo.
Weird we have to warn you about that. But don't do that, please.
Look, I know sometimes the winters get hard, but don't eat your kids.
Okay? Yeah, and I know that they look tasty, but don't do that. The Lamia is another creature you may have heard of. This is a pretty popular Greek monster.
Right.
These are half snake, half women creatures. And they prey on children at night, sucking their blood out if children are caught out too late. So again,
it's always children.
Yeah,
it's
again,
always,
back on this.
A parental tactic.
Yeah, 100%. That's literally what Lamias are. Like Lamias are really popular in Final Fantasy. They're really popular in a lot of other like JRPGs. A lot. They're just like big booba top, long blonde hair, but like gross snake bottom kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
You see those and stuff a lot. Lamia. And the final one for Greeks are the Striges, also known as Strix. These are mythological owls. They're flying birds who seek out humans to eat their flesh and drink their blood. The name Strix has been made synonymous with owls in a lot of cultures today. I think even some languages, Strix is just owl. But in ancient Greece, they were in fact a mythological man-eating owl. That's the origin of the word.
Okay.
So yeah, that's just a fact. There you go. Your owl origins. Most vampire legends that we know today are from the medieval age, like I kind of mentioned, and the spread of Christianity is a big part. And we have mentioned before, a lot of Christian mythos comes from other cultures before it. Vampires, no exception, as we just kind of covered. In the ghost episode that we did for Halloween, we talked about Walter Map and William of Newburgh.
Wow. I never thought we'd bring up those guys again.
They're back because they wrote a book that we talked about, which was a chronicle of the 11th century England day-to-day life, where we talked about revenants rising from the dead and visiting people. Into the story, they mention that these revenants drink the blood of victims. This is the first ever vampire in Christian mythology reference, is this book.
Yeah. And don't let the Revenant see you, because it gets really fast.
It gets really fast and horny. This is the first recorded history we have of it. But before this, as far as oral tradition goes, we had the Norse. Now, the Norse, Old Norse, presents us with the Draugr, which you've probably heard of. You played a game called Skyrim.
Draugr,
yeah. So Skyrim are undead tomb guardians for the Vikings. And in their culture, they believe that if they could, people who could afford to have large tombs, they would fill it with their treasure, and then they would be buried with it, so they'd be well off in the afterlife. And their most loyal soldiers or cohorts or sometimes family members would be buried with them, alive, in their tomb, which is pretty fucking horrifying. Sometimes they were dead, but
sometimes. So your kid's just waiting in the corner to die.
Sometimes they would slit their throat before burying them with you, so that they would at least die. You know, sometimes they wouldn't.
Anybody would want like, hey, I'm on my deathbed. Would you mind slitting my kid's throat and putting him with me? It's just like, why would any parent want that? That's insane.
Yeah. There's also stories that a lot of times it was not willing. They would just find people and kill them and bury them with you. And if you were buried with the treasure of a lord and you bled on the treasure of a lord, you were now a Draugr for that lord.
That's cool. That's
so yeah,
cool
these people would die, usually alive. They'd be buried alive in like in a big tomb, and they would become Draugr. And these Draugrs are tomb guardians of their dead king to protect their treasure. The similarities to vampires here is not the vampirism part, but the contagion part of the Draugr. Because if you break into the tomb where Draugr are, they will attack you. And if you physically get touched by one, you turn into a Draugr to guard the tomb as well.
Damn, that's some heavy shit.
Yeah, so don't break into Viking
Norse
tombs.
lore so cool.
It's because it's the base of our modern fantasy. So it just is modern fantasy. So it's just stuff like that.
Norse mythology, you guys rock.
So yeah, Draugr, unlike Skyrim, in reality, if you see an undead Viking skeleton man coming toward you, don't touch it, or you're going to be its new guard.
Wouldn't be the first thing I think to be like, I'm going to touch this guy.
Which, again, goes on to our story of like telling like myths with purposes. This is saying not to rob tombs. Like, it's very obvious. You're saying if you go in there, you're going to be there forever because you get turned into a zombie, with the tomb guard.
Because you shouldn't do that. Don't grave rob.
Don't grave rob.
It's a fucked up thing to do.
So whoa.
Sorry, my chair just went out for a second. I'm okay.
Well, okay. I'm glad you didn't fall. The largest amount of vampire lore we get, however, comes from the 17th century, just like the werewolves, specifically southeastern Europe and regions like Transylvania, which you may have heard of. There was large amounts of stakings and grave diggings taking place in these regions, and accusations of people being vampires. And during this time, known as the Age of Enlightenment, oddly enough, we saw the death of most folk tales, and science was being discovered, and advances were being made quickly. And while most people listened to scholars and doctors on almost every subject, somehow vampires and werewolves were two things that people just wouldn't listen to them when they said they're not real.
Today's modern day is climate change and recession.
Yeah, basically. There you go. People were like, no, they're real. There's no other explanation. Doctors would be like, no, there is. Look. And they couldn't convince people. So vampires and werewolves kind of became this weird outlier of like surviving mythology, that kind of still existed. So this huge fear of vampires led to many killings and explainable events, being the vampire attacks or vampire sightings, what people would say they were.
Sure.
And this is the beginning of a period of time that is known as the vampire hysteria. So now we're on to part 2, where instead of the history, it's the hysteria. Get it?
Oh, yeah.
Like history, history sounds like history. We're now hysteria. Like, it's very similar.
This is why I do this show.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. So this event is called mass hysteria. We've probably heard that term before. It's just when people freak the fuck out in mass. And this event is considered a case of mass hysteria, which happened in most of Europe, though mostly it was the southeast areas of Europe, that would become infested with vampires. An outbreak of vampire attacks happened in East Prussia in 1721, and the Habsburg monarchy also had an outbreak from 1725 to 1734, which caused a ripple effect to spread to panic to nearby areas as well. And there's even a conspiracy theory today that the Habsburg family are vampires. And,
I think I know this.
Yeah, and there's even a really creepy SCP about it, like where they have like a weird like genetic offshoot vampire family that lives underground. But that's another episode for that. We talk about Habsburg vampires. But most of the stories we're going to cover in Hysteria does take place in the Habsburg monarchy.
Neat.
The first most famous cases about vampires comes from the same time, and I'm going to be going over 2 stories in a row here because they both have government reports from Habsburg monarchy officials who would exchange control of Serbia back and forth to the Ottoman Empire, and both these kind of take place around the same area and the same year in Serbia, modern day Serbia, back then Austria. So the first story is a man named Petar Blagojevic. Petar Blagojevic. Anyway, so Blagojevic. Peter was a villager who lived in a small village of Kisilova.
You got that one.
Yeah, which is possibly modern-day Kisilevo. It's a small town not far from Belgrade. This part of Serbia specifically was exchanging hands between the Ottomans and Austrians who were, going back and forth and warring. So it was a pretty
Classic.
unstable area and people. They literally switched between being controlled by the Turks and the Austrians 7 times in 10 years. So,
Oh god, human beings are really
yeah, pretty cool. So yeah, led to a lot of instability, as you might imagine. Pitar would pass away. Pitar Blagojevic, I think that's how you say it. Blagojevic, yeah. Pitar would pass away for reasons we don't know. It doesn't actually say in the report. In 1725. We don't have a description of his death, just the events that followed.
heart attack.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll read the story and then we'll see what we think. The story goes that within 8 hours of his death, 8 days of his death. Sorry, not hours. In 8 days of his death, 9 other villagers would be dead.
Wow, it's almost just like people die.
Well, it's a small village, so that was a high amount. It probably had 50 people living in it.
That is a big deal.
Each victim, before their death, would be able to speak a little bit before dying and bleeding out, saying that they were attacked by Pitar Blagojevic. But the town knew he had passed away just before this.
So that's impossible.
Impossible. He couldn't come back for the dead. So Pitar's wife said that after his death, the next day he visited her house at night and asked for his shoes and wouldn't say anything else.
He lived with his wife?
He was dead. So he came to his wife's house at the night after his death.
Oh,
asking for his shoes.
Her house then, huh?
Yeah. So yeah, here it was her house. Yeah, asking for his shoes, and she was so terrified, and that she got them for him, and without saying anything, he just left into the night.
Well, good. He needed his shoes.
His wife was so terrified and fearing for her safety of this, she moved out of the village and went to another one more north.
Jesus. Okay.
Pitar is also said to have visited his own son that same night, knocking on his door and demanding food. His son was shocked and not knowing what to do, having seen his dead father being buried the last day, refused to give him any food. And not deciding to give him food was a bad idea, because what would happen would be that his dad would rip open his son's throat.
Oh, God. Oh, well, that's vampire-like. But, couldn't he have just offered him some, beef or pork or venison or anything else that may have been blood or meat-related instead of, I don't know, your son's neck? That's what they did in Twilight. They went for deer. They didn't go for people. They went for deer.
Well,
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm crazy.
I don't know why he wouldn't give him food. You're right. I don't know what the deal with the refusal is, but his son was found dead with his throat ripped open and blood everywhere. And it's believed that he drank his blood from his neck.
Yeah. Classic.
So no one could find Pitar after this bloody scene. And
Did
the
they
village
try to look in his grave and it was gone?
that's the next thing. The villagers got together and said, we're going to dig up his grave. And so they got the local priest as well as Camero Provisor from Bald, who was I think that's the Habsburg monarchy, Austrian title for a governor or mayor of a small region, town maybe. He lived in the town.
Well, I'll say this: we've come a long way with the human language.
Yeah. So we're just gonna call him from Ball from the rest. I think Camero Provisor is just a title. So yeah, from Bald was a local governing official for the monarchy, and he was to be present for the exhuming of the body as well. And he's also the one who wrote this report, which is still available today. You can read it. It's in multiple books, and it's also physically available somewhere in a museum in Austria. So From Bald asked the villagers to wait and get permission from Belgrade to do this investigation, as otherwise it could be seen as the crime of disturbing a grave. The villagers, however, refused and claimed that something similar had happened during the Ottoman Empire ruling, and they never heard back, and the whole village went from about 100 people to 50 people during the attacks. So they forced him to go along with it, which he heavily noted in his report. Otherwise, the village was going to do it themselves. So Frumbald agreed and went with the priest to the gravesite and began overseeing the exhumation of the corpse. The priest and Frumbald were both astonished to open the coffin and see Pitar inside. However, he had longer hair and a full beard, which he did not have before. His flesh was looking less aged than when he was buried. His nails were visible on the bottom of the coffin, having been replaced with claw-like nails, as well as fresh blood still in his mouth and on the top of the coffin lid.
Yo, that's the OG vampire thing, man.
Yeah.
And also, that must have been scary. And they're lying, because that's not...
They might not be lying, and there might be some science behind this. The priest
you're right.
and Frumbald quickly agreed he has to be a vampire. So what they did is they did what you do and got a stake and drove it through his heart.
That's the science right there.
Yeah, right there. So with the stake in his heart, fresh blood began to pour from his mouth, ears, and nose. The rest of the town decided they needed to partake in this punishment as well, and began each having a turn, staking the heart of the vampire. So I guess that was fun for the town. Frumbald concludes his report with a notion that if this is determined to be wrong and criminal, he should be free of blame, as the village forced him into this act. Luckily for our guy, the Habsburg monarchy government saw no issue with it, and no further investigation was ever deemed necessary.
Well, let's see. It seems to me that you took down a vampire all in a day's work.
Literally what happened. They're like, oh, well, good job doing God's work. Have a great day.
Yeah.
So
the demon put in the dirt, bitch.
Back in hell with you, creature. We got him, guys. So the case of Pitar is the first ever documented, and for the record, the killings did stop after that. What caused the death of the other people besides the son, we don't know, because it is suspiciously not part of this document. We don't know what they looked like, we don't know how they died, just that they blamed seeing him choking them before they died. So I don't know if they died of asphyxiation. If so, that's going to fall in line with a lot of other things we'll talk about in a little bit.
Gotcha. Great.
So that's the first fully intact vampire report, by a government official we have today, and many more would be happening. The next year, we have one in 1726, which would be the case of Arnold Paol. This is actually a two-part report that would be reported by three different officials.
Wait, what year was it?
1726.
Oh, 26. I think you said 76, and I was about to lose my mind.
No, not then. Not the vampire uprising in America. So, three people would do reports on this. Two are different government officials during the event, and the third is a post-event report by a church official.
Gotcha.
So Arnold was a Hajduk, which, if you don't know what that is, which you probably don't,
I do not.
They are a type of irregular soldier from the Balkan region, and they served under the Austrian Habsburg monarchy. And to the Ottomans, they were seen as brigands and thieves. But what they were basically soldiers for hire who were Christian. So they would always they would protect the Christian Austrian side against the Islamic Turkish Ottoman side, right? So they were usually there'd be Hajduk cells inside Ottoman territory that would rise up in places like Bulgaria and Greece and Serbia that were controlled by the Ottomans.
Right, yeah.
So Arnold was one of those, and he would retire from his life of being a soldier and become a farmer in Serbia.
Oh.
So the Austrian investigator named Flukinger, something like that. I don't know, German.
Sure.
He returned from fighting he reports he returned from fighting the Turks in Ottoman-controlled part of Serbia called Gasowa, which is likely modern-day Kosovo. He told the villagers a story that when he was fighting the Turks, he was attacked by a vampire. But he was able to cure himself of the sickness by smothering the dead vampire's blood on his face, and then eating the soil from the grave of the vampire. I guess that's how you do it.
That's awful. That digestion. Ugh.
Yeah, that's seems like putting vampire blood on you isn't how you. Anyway.
The opposite.
Yeah. So maybe that's exactly what happened, because not long after returning home from being a farmer, he fell off his hay cart while haying and broke his neck.
Oh well. Oh, that's what a way to go.
Yeah, especially right after being like a soldier and surviving like 20 years of fighting.
It's like I can finally relax and take it easy and.
Yeah. Oh, fuck, dead. So,
Yeah.
he was buried soon after, but that wouldn't be the last time the villagers would see Arnold Paol, because within 20 to 30 days after his death, 4 other villagers were dead, and they were attacked at night by Arnold, who would die shortly after. The village was concerned, maybe, that due to Arnold's story, that he wasn't as cured of vampirism as he thought he was. And after 10 days, 40 days total after Arnold's death, they would get together and open his grave. The report states that they did not see a vampire, Pat, but they saw what is known as a vampire lord, or an arch-vampire in this tomb. Now, what this means is he had pale, translucent skin where you could see the veins protruding through with blood pumping actively.
Oh, God.
He had long hair and beard. He had claws, blackened claws instead of fingernails, and toenails. His body had not decomposed at all, and there was also the roof of the coffin was splattered with fresh blood. They identified him as an arch-vampire, better known as a vampire lord, as I mentioned, and would drive a stake through his heart. And when that was done, he would awake and shriek, clawing out at the people before him, before dying shortly after.
Ooh, that happened. True facts.
Yeah, true facts. So after he was staked, they did what you do, and they cut his head off, put it on his torso, and lit the coffin on fire.
You can't come back if you're Ash.
Yeah, exactly. And so they then proceeded to dig up each of his victims, just in case they felt like getting up, and did the same exact procedure.
Well, that sucks for them.
This is reported by a man known as Glacier as well, and once again by a priest a few years later. But this was just the first part of the report, because there's a second part in the same town 5 years later, in 1731. Because another outbreak of vampirism hit the community, with 10 dead in several weeks. But before they died, the victims said they had 2 stab wounds in their stomach.
Oh.
But the officials didn't know what attacked them, because the stab wounds were too small to be a dagger and too pointy to be a fang of an animal. Sound familiar? Anyway, vampire teeth. One report blames a woman named Milica, who was a 50-year-old woman who had moved to the town 6 years before from Ottoman-controlled Serbia, and she had reportedly eaten 2 sheep who had been attacked by vampires, and the report claims that she got infected and started the outbreak.
Oh.
The other report claims that it was a woman named Stana, who allegedly smeared herself with vampires' blood to avoid being bitten by one that was terrorizing a town nearby.
That's smart moves, though, because if you smell like one, they won't bother you.
Yeah, but then you become a vampire. If people like covering themselves in vampires' blood, like if it's the thing you get by getting bitten by a vampire, like stop covering yourself in vampire parts.
Well, if you cover yourself in the blood, I don't think it's a big deal. But if you get it like into an open cut, or like you digest it, maybe it's a problem. But if you just like rub it on your forehead to smell a little bit like a vampire to sneak by, that might be okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I'm fucked. Maybe I'm going to turn into a vampire.
You're going to become a vampire. It's done.
Yeah. I don't want to live forever.
So, eating the meat of an animal that was killed by a vampire is a way to get vampirism, as well as putting vampire blood in yourself, of course.
That makes sense.
These stories tell the same report, but they're unsurprisingly, there is conflicting evidence. The later and third report done by a priest has an entirely different origin for the outbreak, saying the son of a local farmer who had died 10 weeks before in a different town showed up here with no one knowing who he was or knowing he was supposed to be dead, and just kind of started eating people.
Great.
Yeah, so that's that story. So as you can see from these cases, the spread of vampirism is based on rampant hysteria. Many aspects can be explained, such as understanding simply how corpses decay. Like, their skin gets drawn back on the top of the scalp and the fingers, which makes nails look like they're longer or hair look like it's longer, but it's not. The skin is actually retracting after death.
Yeah, and someone else pointed it out as well, but like you can keep growing your hair and fingernails out.
No, you don't. That's what I'm saying. That's a myth. What happens is that the skin on your hand goes the opposite direction. So the nails look longer and the hair looks longer, but they don't. They just become messier and they kind of get loose because the roots are falling apart. So it's like that's kind of how. So that's why they say they look like claws, because the fingernail skin that you see on top of your fingernail recedes almost all the way back to the knuckle, and the bottom part is gone. So it looks like you have this giant claw sticking out, especially with the tip of your finger bone.
God, I don't want to. Oh, God, we sound disgusting when we.
Oh, we're gross as we die. There's another thing too. Both these cases said there was fresh blood in the top of the coffin. It's common that when you're dead and things like worms and rats get into your coffin and start eating you and they get inside you, that there's a jerk muscle reaction of coughing blood out, which would explain like why there would be blood on the roof of the coffin, because there's still blood in the body.
I'm not going to sleep good tonight because I'm just going to be thinking about what my body's going to be like. Just fire me into fucking space, dude. We'll just get cremated. You don't have to worry about it. Yeah, that's a good point.
And then you can't get back up as a vampire, so you're saving everyone some trouble if you get cremated. Yeah. So these reports are, like I said, able to be read today. They are public. I did read them for this, and having read it being translated into English, they are pretty rough. And they make so many assumptions. It's so stupid. It's hard to even call it an investigation. The first one is a lot better. The guy who wrote the first one, the Petar Blagojevic report, he just didn't want to get arrested. Like, it's so obvious. Like, I would like to state I did not support the action of undigging a body. Like, stuff like that. He just constantly says that. He's like, we're just saying what kind of happened. And then he could very easily be reporting these vampire things because he makes it harder for him to get in trouble, you know, if he says a vampire. You can read them if you want to. I recommend looking them up just to kind of see how ridiculous they are and kind of how hysterical they are.
Send them to me. I actually do want to read them.
I could probably find them again. This hysteria lasted for a few generations, and today it is known as the 18th century vampire controversy. That's the historical event.
Oh, that's fun.
There's actually that's where I read these reports. It's a book called The 18th Century Vampire Conspiracy, and it's all about it. And these reports are in it, translated to English. Rural epidemics of death were often blamed on vampires being backed by government officials, who would partake in staking. There would be church-paid vampire hunters. This kind of stuff didn't help people move on, surprisingly.
No, I bet not.
Seeing your government...
It'd be fun to be a vampire hunter and be in on it. Being
We'll talk about it a little bit more later, of what vampire hunters probably actually were. But they're... I guess what they were is that they were just people paid to hunt down vampires. But who were the vampires? And did they ever actually kill anyone? I don't know. We talked about it in the werewolf episode more, where they kind of acted like vigilantes stopping serial killers.
Yeah. Right.
That seems to be their general role.
Badass.
Yeah, there's not a lot of reports of vampires killing people who didn't seem like they were murderers. They're all the vampire reports of them finding vampires. They're already dead. They dig up the body and stake it, like we just talked about. So it's not like they're killing someone. So yeah,
it's a miserable job of
legally digging up a grave and putting holy water on it. So many scholars at the time, like we kind of mentioned before, they denied the existence of vampires, and they claimed that most of these were cases of premature burial. Was a popular one. People that they thought were dead but weren't and buried alive.
Oh, right. They put bells in their graves for a while.
Yeah, there was a couple of different ways they would do it, but if they didn't do that, you were just fucked, and you might look pretty disturbing. It's like there's a common vampire evidence is the top of the coffin is scratched at. Oh. So that would mean you were probably buried alive trying to get out, and you suffocated eventually.
Yay.
Yeah, good days. Most brutal way to go. Definitely top fear of mine, 100%.
Yeah. Same here. Absolutely horrifying.
So other sicknesses such as rabies can also be used to describe it, especially tuberculosis. Which if you die of tuberculosis, which was rampantly fatal and all over the world, especially the low health regions such as Southeastern Europe, there would be tuberculosis everywhere because there was war and people got sick and sickness spread and you die of choking. And all these cases report that the vampires were choking people before they died. There's also evidence that you can hallucinate if you're in the late stages of tuberculosis. So, there you go. So yeah, despite these doctors and scholars publishing books, especially on the Habsburg Empire, trying to stop people from believing this stuff, it didn't stop. People kept going. A popular theologist and scholar named Dom Augustine Calmet wrote a treatise on the subject, where he was ambiguous to the existence of vampires. And a very famous critic and writer at the time, Voltaire, reviewed this book and posted a review. Yeah, he's a crazy person, but he was a respected writer at the time. And crazy person. And he people thought he was crazy back then too. He's like he thinks Batman is like a god. Anyway, he reviewed the treatise and interpreted the paper as saying that vampires do in fact exist. And he was quoted on the subject as saying vampires were corpses who went out of their grave at night to suck the blood of the living, either the throat or the stomach, after which they returned to their cemeteries. The person so sucked grew pale, and fell to consumption, while the sucking corpse grew fat, got rosy, and enjoyed an excellent appetite. It was in Poland, Hungary, Silesia, Moravia, Austria, and Lorraine that the dead made good cheer.
And those were the cases of the world's best blowjobs. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's where they all got the big sucking. So he was basically saying that like he thought this priest, he was a scholar. Back at this time, a lot of scientists were priests. That's just how it worked. That's where this was that time.
No, that's true. Yeah, religion and science were basically the same thing.
Yeah. So this was a scientist who was a theologist as well. He published this, and he was saying that vampires may or may not exist. And Voltaire reviewed it, saying, "Oh, they're real, and they're in Poland, Hungary, Silesia, Moravia, Austria, Lorraine. Like that's where they live."
I'll prove it, he says while he's running naked down the square.
Yeah, I'll prove it, he says. Beat your kids. Anyway, so that's Voltaire's message. It wouldn't be until Empress Maria Theresa of Austria had enough. I think it's a Civ. I think Civ. I think she's the Civ leader for Austria. She had enough of this hysteria, and something had to be done. So she was sent her personal physician, a doctor named Gerhard von Swieten, to go out and investigate vampire claims around the Habsburg monarchy and examine the bodies. When he returned, he declared they were all normal decomposing bodies, and absolutely nothing supernatural was taking place.
Wow, good. Thank God.
The Empress made note of this and made many laws to prevent the opening of graves and the desecration of bodies. And sure enough, vampire attacks stopped happening.
Wow, crazy.
Yeah, weird.
What a good leader. What a good leader.
So yeah, Thanks. She just stopped that from happening. So that was the end of the vampire hysteria. That's like the mid 1700s. So that's the end of the hysteria part. So we're going to part 3, which is vampires around the world, which I love this part. We're going to look into every continent we're going to go through. We're going to start off in Europe, where we just were. We're going to stay local in a country of southeastern Europe called Albania.
Heard of it?
Yeah, I heard of it. So here we see 2 creatures. We have the Striga and the Dhampir. So the Striga are a bit different. These are living human witches who are often old women with disfigured faces, wearing long cloaks, and they're vampiric in nature as they drink infants' bloods to stay immortal. It's usually why they look disfigured.
So much of that fucking blood, baby blood.
Yeah, but it's babies, and
even to this day they accuse
it's always baby blood. I guess it's to make it. No. They do. They bathe in it. I guess it's to make it seem worse. That's my only it's the worst possible way. It's
like
babies.
An insult. It's like they're so bad they drink baby blood. It's just kind of like all right, they just fucking don't pay taxes.
As you're sipping old person blood, acting high and mighty.
Yeah.
So what would happen though with these Striga is when the baby was bitten by one, they wouldn't die, but they would become transformed into bug-like creatures who served the Striga as like thralls. And these vampire thralls have like fly heads. They're gross looking.
That sounds disgusting.
And there is a cure to the babies, but the Striga is the only one who can cure them. So sometimes people would have to convince the Striga to cure their insect baby. Male Striga do exist, but they're rare, and they're known as the Strigu or the Strigan. Either way. So next we're going to talk about Dhampir. Have you heard of this? The Dhampir?
It sounds familiar.
So it's a really popular. It's in some media stuff as well. So Dhampir are common across all of the Balkans, and they're present in a lot of vampire folklore today. And what a Dhampir is they're a child between a male vampire and a female human. So the Marvel comic Blade That's what Blade is. He's a Dhampir. They call them daywalkers. That's another common term for them.
Yeah, I know that.
They often are known to possess supernatural abilities, and they come from the belief that the male vampires have an intense desire for women, specifically deflowering virgins, for the record, and and they use their hypnotic gaze to seduce women. Male Dhampir are said to have the ability to see vampires that go invisible, and they practice sorcery to help them in their ability to fight off vampires. And this led to many vampire hunters claiming to be Dhampir. And they would be hired for jobs of protection and hunting vampires on the basis they could see them. Female Dhampir had many of the same abilities, but instead of seeing invisible vampires, they simply just live normal lives. End of story.
That turned anticlimactic.
Yep, there's a no trade-off. If you're a lady and you're a Dhampir, you just get to be normal, but you do have some cool vampire strength and stuff. You just don't have vampire vision, I guess. The Dhampir have an extended life and increased physical attributes of a vampire, such as the classic strength and agility, but they don't need to drink blood, and they don't have a weakness to sunlight. It is also said that if a vampire touches the blood of a Dhampir, it will burn through their skin or even dissolve them entirely.
Oh, great.
So, Bulgarian folklore states that Dhampir have a mark on their back as well, like a small tail. And they would also say that Dhampir have no bones, or gelatinous bones, which gives them the extra ability to squeeze into small spaces. So, there's that. There's your Dhampir. That's what a Dhampir is. If you ever hear about that, now you know. Never heard of the bone thing before. That was new to me.
No.
But, sure. Keeping it to the Balkans, we're going to visit Greece. And we're going to talk about the Vrikolakas, which we talked about in the vampire episode. A werewolf episode. This is the vampire episode.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, it's the same word for werewolf. Vampire, werewolf, same word.
Yep, I remember that because you were saying that they were interchangeable at the time. See, I pay attention.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, they're interchangeable. And some lore states that when a werewolf dies, it returns as a vampire in Greece. So there's that fun fact.
Cool.
So Crete, the island specifically,
Yep.
Real deep belief and fear of vampires, even today. I don't know where it started. I don't know why they have this fucking vampire obsession, but they do. If you live on Crete, please let me know. It spread to mainland Greece, however, in the 18th and 19th century. And many practices were made to combat and prevent vampirism in the area, such as having deceased people be exhumed from their graves every 3 years. And if any sign of long nails or hair was seen, which it always was, weirdly enough, they would have someone would read a sacrament over them while pouring holy wine and then burning the body.
It's almost like growing hair and nails is like happens to a body.
You'd think when it gets to 100% chance, they'd get a little suspicious and be like,
"We're all vampires."
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Like maybe that's what it is. Maybe they're freaked out about it because they think that the people of Crete are all vampires. Like all Crete natives are vampires, and they have to maintain it to stop it from spreading. I don't freaking know. But here's one of my favorite parts of this episode. This is Atlas's guide on how to become a vampire in Greece.
Atlas's Guide to How to Become a Vampire in Greece. There you go.
Yeah, get ready. Number 1, excommunicated from the church. Sorry.
Oh, that's easy.
Sorry, vampire.
Get out of here.
Yeah, you're done. You're a vampire. Number
Jesus
2.
and Zeus no longer love you.
Jesus and Zeus both. Damn, you're not only excommunicated from the church of God, but also your old pantheon. Jeez. So number 2, you ate meat that was killed by a wolf. Sorry, vampire. Gotta kill that meat yourself. Don't eat someone else. Don't eat a wolf's kill. You'll be a vampire.
Yeah,
Duh.
Don't be a little stingy bitch.
Number 3, a cat walks over your grave. Sorry, vampire. You're a vampire.
That probably happened a lot.
Yeah, maybe that's where it comes from. They believed there was cats living in graveyards, so everyone became a vampire. So you had to dig it up and burn them.
As long as the cats were okay.
They didn't say anything about killing cats ever, so I'm assuming the cats are fine. But apparently, if a cat walks over your grave when you're dead, you're getting back up to
Vampire.
drink blood, baby.
That's such a drum. That's such a jump. That's such a jump. Sorry, just like a very innocent thing to something so fucking extreme.
You think that's a jump?
Oh, here we go.
Wait for my last and favorite too. So this next one is fucked. I'm a vampire, 100% because this next one.
Oh.
Working on a holiday
Oh, I've done that.
You're a vampire. Sorry.
Oh fuck! I bet everybody in chat as well.
Everybody in chat's a vampire.
A vampire. Yeah.
I'm a vampire.
Listening to this now on YouTube is a vampire.
I'm a vampire. My roommate standing in the room right next to you right now is a vampire. We're all vampires. We worked on a whole. Yep. Your roommate. He's playing video games right now. He's a vampire. Yo, stake him. Stake him. What are you doing? I got to stake Jeff right now. Anyway.
But if we're all vampires, though, doesn't that mean we're like? We gotta suck each other.
Honestly, I'm cool with it. I'll take it. I'll take the curse. Let me have an interesting life. You know, I can get hit by a truck tomorrow.
I want to fly.
I want to be a flying vampire before
and you get hit
that.
by a truck, you're probably gonna be okay because you'll take the hit because you're a vampire and you're
you're just a vampire. You're done. So, and my final one, which is another great way to become a vampire, dying alone.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm definitely gonna be a vampire.
Not like alone as in no family. Like as if you were walking across the street, got shot, and just left there.
Oh, well,
that's what it means. Like if you're just dead in an alley, like you die alone in an alley, you wake up as a vampire.
Work on a holiday. That one's not fair. I'm sorry. No. I'm still stuck on that.
That's my favorite thing. If I want to become a vampire, I can just go to Crete and get a job at like Walmart. They're not going to give me a holiday off.
That was invented by back in the day. Like the husband kept wanting to work all the time, and the wife was back at home with the kids. It was just kind of like, look, I read that if you go to work on a holiday, you're going to become a vampire, and then we're going to have to kill you. Fine, I'll stay home.
Yeah,
good, because otherwise
exactly.
you're going to scare the kids.
Or a really cool local leader of the church who was like, "You guys shouldn't have to work on holidays."
That. It was most likely that.
You know, I know how to convince people not to work on holidays.
No.
So yeah, that's vampiring. That's becoming a vampire in Greece. So today in Crete specifically, rituals like this are still observed. Weird. They kind of still dig up bodies sometimes. I don't think they do it legally, but they do. I saw a lot of posts about
catch people digging dead bodies up. We should just like camp in a graveyard for a month and see if we catch anybody.
That's the thing. I don't think it's like illegal, but I think it's like we don't talk about it. Kind of thing.
If they do it, good.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's Crete has this weird thing, and they're like a cryptid in Greece now, especially Crete. Like there's like footage found of a vampire. You know, like how we see crawler footage and Bigfoot stuff. Like they do that with vampires.
Oh, I saw one on TikTok today about Sasquatch.
I love TikTok, guys. If you're listening to this and you like these cryptid episodes, use TikTok and like follow like the cryptid talk or the just like sightings talk, whatever it's called, something like that.
I saw that
so many creepy ones
recently. The one in the cowboy ranch.
The hay. Oh my gosh.
The horse freaking out. I saw that one recently again, and I
hate it.
It chills every time.
Hate it. Okay, we're gonna leave Greece. We're gonna take a trip up. We're gonna go through the Black Sea, and we're gonna hit up Romagna, home of modern day Transylvania. So you might have guessed they have some pretty deep vampire lore.
Heard of them?
Yeah, there's two main ones here. The Strigoi and the Moroi. Have you ever heard those words said?
Strigoi, I think so, but Moroi, no.
Strigoi is more common. Strigoi is used a lot in things as like a vampire family or a type of vampire, usually more monstrous. Like in Warhammer, for example, one of the vampire casts is called the Strigoi, and they look like they're like Nosferatu. You know, like they're like gross and they have like big wings and stuff. Not sexy. So these words are used a lot today, just synonymously with vampire. But what Strigoi are in the legend is they're living witches who possess 2 hearts, 2 souls, or 2 of both. And they would send their souls out of their bodies at night to meet up with other Strigoi, who would then get together as a pack and consume the blood of livestock, primarily, secondarily humans. Dead Strigoi would return as animated corpses to continue this, but drinking blood would keep them living as long as it was human blood, so they would prefer to drink out of humans. So there's that's like a straight up vampire. Like the dead Strigoi, they're just classic vampire basically. A fun cool thing about Strigoi too is they're weak to holy symbols. This is the first time that's kind of been a thing. The cross kills them, but not just the cross. Also, ancient Druidic and like Celtic symbols killed them as well. Of the people, not Celtic or Druidic, I can't remember the time. The tribes that lived in stuff like Romani symbols, stuff like that we see today, kills vampires too, just like a cross, which is a great.
Got it.
It makes it more sense if you know if you it's like all religious symbols kill cross because religion. You know what I mean? Like it's not
Right.
kill vampires. It's not just crosses. It's not just Christianity.
Yeah, it's the idea that order defeats chaos.
Yeah, it's
Basically.
something like that. So if you're bit by a Strigoi, you would become one again, more with the vampire stuff. But if not, you could become one by being born if with an extra nipple. You're a Strigoi. If you
Dude,
had
why? That's so weird. What the fuck? The thing that I'm learning most about everything ever in this entire episode is the weird fucking conditions. I'm sorry, I'm swearing a lot for some. Apparently, I'm mad about this. The weird random conditions that there are for like these things. Cat walks over your grave. You got a third nipple. Like what the hell? Is
it's not just a third nipple too, but it's also the
Humans are weird.
it's also if you have a tail because people can have tails. Just I've mentioned it twice now in this episode.
Saiyans.
No, not quite. It's you usually want to get it removed because it can cause serious health problems. But you can be born with a tail. Your tailbone can grow out a little bit, and flesh will grow on the tip of it and stick out a little bit like a tail. And it means you can't sit down properly, so you get really bad scoliosis.
Oh, right.
So you usually have to get it removed as a baby. But if you're born with a tail, of course, back then they can't safely remove it. So and it's so rare to happen that it's like you're a vampire. Obviously, I don't know what else you could possibly be.
Oh, that's so sad. Doctor, what's wrong with my kid? I don't know, it's a fucking vampire, I guess. It's like, what?
Okay, now that might be that right. That's like sad and weird, right? But what if? Hear me out.
Okay.
Hear me out. What if you're the seventh
Weird way to
child
start this.
of a family, and every other kid before you was the same gender?
It's a vampire.
You're a vampire, obviously. Yeah, you're a vampire.
You're a vampire.
There's no.
You're a
It
vampire.
has to be. Yeah. You're a vampire. So what if your mom was pregnant with you, right?
You're a vampire.
And she not yet, but what if she walked down the street and a black cat crossed her path?
You get abducted by aliens and probed. Oh, no, sorry, I'm wrong. Wrong page. You're a vampire.
Vampire, yeah. That's next time. Go back. What if
Two black
you
cats,
what if
aliens, one
what
black
if
cat, vampire.
yeah, okay. If you see two black cats, you're in a simulation, and everything changes at that point. Everything changes.
Yeah, you took the wrong pill.
So, what if you have red hair and blue eyes?
I think what happens is you start an OnlyFans and you make a lot of money. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
You
What's
can.
it?
You can, yes.
You're a vampire.
You're a vampire, yeah. Because you're probably sexy, because you're a vampire.
Because you're so sexy.
Yeah, these are sexy vampires, by the way.
Sexy-ass redheads.
Strigoi who aren't like the Witch originals, like all the offsprings, the ones who are bitten. These are classic sexy vampires. Like they're described as looking like your best self. So like you're always fit and you're always at your peak age physically.
I'm definitely not that.
Okay, what if you had a child out of wedlock?
Oh, that's such a class. That one I'm not surprised about. And obviously you're a vampire.
Obviously, you're a vampire. Yeah, obviously.
But
yeah.
like that one is such a classic.
that
Like,
that
the
yes,
Catholics-
100%.
The Catholics just shoehorned that one in. They were like, oh fuck, let's just come up with a bunch of random shit and then make that one in there too. And it seems like, oh how random. Oh don't
Yeah.
fuck people.
Oh no, don't have sex unless you're married.
Don't sex. Dude, oh my god.
Yeah, so that's the
Why does it
Strigoi.
always come back to the Catholic Church?
Oh, they're totally involved in this. They're vampires, dude. So
lizard people.
the lizard people, yeah, who drink blood. The Moroi. So you may recognize the name because it's a ghost in Phasmophobia.
Never heard of it.
What, Phasmophobia?
Yeah, go ahead.
No. So these are often, in some things, just seen as another word for Strigoi. Like there's some things, but there is a lot of things that differentiate them. The most common is that a Moroi is the child of two Strigoi. So if two living Strigoi, the witch versions, have a baby, it comes out as a Moroi.
It sounds like chemistry.
And what's wrong with the Moroi is they're usually specter-like. They're kind of like like ghosts, right? And they don't drink blood, but they drink your energy. They consume your aura. They're energy
That's a
vampires.
Dementor.
Yeah,
Dementor.
That's I would bet money they're just based off of Dementors are based off of these things because they
No,
literally
they're based off Dementor.
they
J.K.
literally
Rowling's 1,000 years old.
J.K. Rowling is a vampire. Okay, I mean there we go. She's a Strigoi. That's why she can't get over common. Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway.
so if you're left alone, a Strigoi or Moroi, will eventually make you pass out because the Strig's sucking up your energy so much, and you'll just die eventually because it'll keep sucking.
Oh, I thought that was my boss. No, I'm just kidding. My boss.
Capitalism. So during the hysteria, Romanians would often dig up their dead to check for fangs, similar to the Greeks, but a lot less ceremonial. They would just be like, "You got fangs," and they just
Yank them out.
if they thought so, which they probably did because their lips were receding into their body because they're falling off, they would just burn the body. So going north a little bit, we're going to hit up the Slavic cultures. What's
up, guys?
They depict a very similar vampire to the ones that we know, even using words we've covered before. Most of our knowledge of vampires today can be traced to Balkans and Slavic vampire legends. East Slavs in the northern region, aka Russia, believe that there are undead who drink blood, but they're simply referred to as undead. They don't use the word vampire until the late 19th century. They use the word undead. So I don't know if they were supposed to be zombies, just zombie kind of thing. Well, I don't know.
For some reason, my child brain associated vampires and zombies because vampires rise the dead sometimes for some reason in some things.
Yeah.
So that's I kind of see the connection, I guess.
Well,
and a lot of this lore comes from the idea that these people had died, quote unquote, and then been resurrected, similar to zombies. So I guess
no, it does make sense because they're both undead. They're both said to be undead. They're the two undead things. So it makes sense. They are in the same family, right? And the reason why a lot of vampires are known to do that kind of thing is because a lot of vampires are known to also practice necromancy, black magic, because they're evil, right? So that's what they do.
Not all of them.
They're all evil, but they know he was sexy. So in Ukraine and Belarus, we see a very modern version of the vampire in their lore. And while they are undead, in Ukraine, they'll often will not refer to them as undead. They simply just say vampire because they look young and healthy, and they're indistinguishable from living.
Oh.
In 19th century Ukraine, we saw a cholera epidemic where they thought that vampires had redder skin, which is what happens when you have cholera. So when you got
a lot of steaks, huh?
Yep, that's the next sentence. A lot of people got staked before they were dead because they had cholera. So
that sucks.
Yeah, bad time to be in Ukraine. And that's the end of that sentence. Anyway, one earlier story of a vampire, though not legally recorded, is that of Jir Grando from the village of Kvinda in modern-day Croatia.
Wonderful.
The village had a mass panic after Grando died and returned from the dead the next day, drinking the blood of villagers while sexually harassing his wife at night.
Hey, baby, I got some A positive here. You want to give it a shot? Nice butt.
I love that that's the way they worded it. I don't know if it meant he was R-wording her, but they say sexually harassing, which is hilarious to me. It's very funny. He's grabbing her chest, but he's kind of like a ghosty vampire. He's her. He was staked in the heart, but it didn't take. So they cut his head off, and that did take. And that was the end of Grando. But that happened in Croatia in 1670 something. So it's before the reports we covered earlier, but there's no report on it. It's just a story that they tell.
Oh, so bullshit.
Unlike the other ones, which were factually real.
Everything else so far has been real.
100% real. The Romani people believe that the vampires return from the dead and drink human blood, targeting their relatives or those who ended their lives. They believe vampire men are deviants who lust after women and create what are known as the Dhampir, like we talked about before.
Those aren't vampire men. Those are just men.
Men, yeah, just men lusting. So female vampires in Romani society live out mostly normal lives. They can just be chill. But if you marry a female vampire, you're going to eventually die because of their intense sexual appetite.
I gotta admit,
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna find a Romani caravan. I'm gonna.
I think I'm gonna go out that way. That's how I'm gonna go out.
Gonna do this.
Find a sexy vampire that wants to fucking crush me to death with horny. Please. Anyway, that's my Tinder profile. Go ahead.
So yeah, the deviant, deviant vampire men who had these Dhampir children would often be hired as protectors from vampires of the Romani caravans as they would, travel across Europe and stuff.
Yeah, hire me.
Even today, there's still a thing. There are still people who claim to be
shit.
Dhampir who protect the Romani caravans from vampires. Sexy vampires. There is another. If you don't know what Romani are, just Google it. I'm not going to say the racist word for them. That will get me canceled.
Okay.
Starts with a G. Not supposed to say it anymore. That's what the Romani are. I want to be clear, just so you understand what I'm talking about. It is still an active culture today. They are still
mad respect, dog.
They are still very nomadic, and they travel the world, and they often will hire Dhampir vampire hunters. There's actually a show about it on Netflix, which is really good. I recommend watching, but I can't remember the name about it. So must be not be that good, I guess. Anyway, over in the UK, we have the Scottish Barbon Sith, who is a succubus-like fae who appears as a beautiful woman wearing a long green dress to hide her deer-looking feet and legs.
Oh, like a satyr kind of, but instead of a goat, it's a deer.
It's a deer. Sounds cute until she finds men alone in the woods who are hunting, and she catches them and sucks their blood out, and they die.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. That one's not as hot as the other one.
This one might be though. The Lihanan Shi at the Isle of Man is another fae, and what this one does is kind of similar. They seek men to drink their blood, but they marry the man, and they bless them with a life of genius and success.
Wow, Jesus Christ!
And they're like a good wife. Like they're like a great wife. Like they love you, they take care of you, but every night they gotta take a little blood suck. And what happens is, unlike a vampire where you get infected and become a cool vampire dude, you just have a massively shortened lifespan by about 20, 30 years.
Dude, I'll die at 50 for
you
that.
You get to be a bright candle that burns quick. So some people in the legends looked for this. They were okay with living a short, wealthy life. They could be happy. They could be like some great painter or musician or businessman and be rich, but you're going to die at 40. So
yeah, but you get a hot banging vampire.
You do get a hot banging vampire wife, and she just looks like a gorgeous woman. She's not a deer person.
She's cool. Apparently, she's cool, so she'll like hang out with you and shit.
Yeah,
so she'll be like,
you
guys can party and stuff together. That sounds like a lot of fun. It sucks when you leave. Like, imagine having such a wonderful time. Maybe that she even misses you. That'd be nice.
Yeah, she is described as a great wife. So I'm assuming in every way she's a great wife. But better than you for killing you slowly.
Yeah, whatever.
So now we're going to leave Europe and we're going to go to Africa. So African folklore, I haven't talked a lot about it, and it's pretty wild. African folklore is insane. It's a lot going on. There's so many different people with so many different folklore, and we're going to go over ones that I could find that were pretty vampire-like. A lot of them don't have traits too similar to a vampire, but there are ones that engage in vampirism. And these are the ones that will take place that I will, these are the ones I will be explaining. First is the West African Ashanti people who tell of the Asanbosum, who is a person who lives in trees with iron teeth, and they drink the blood of humans.
Damn, that's fucking crazy.
Some articles describe them as people, some monsters. So I have a feeling they're kind of supposed to be like our vampires, and kind of are people. They look like people,
Right, yeah.
The Iwe tribe, I think it's how you say it, it's EWE, Iwe tribe, tell of the Adze, a monster who takes the form of a firefly and hunts children, drinking their blood with its proboscis when they catch one.
Parental tactics. Every time it's children, parental tactics.
And parental tactics. South Africa, the Impundulu, who is a large taloned bird who summons thunder and lightning with its wings. But if it catches a person who's unfortunate enough to see it, it's going to drink your blood.
Oh, that's not so good.
In Madagascar, it's actually a really cool story. I looked up a couple of things about this. It's called the Romanga. The Betselio people tell the story of this thing. And in their language, since the 17th century, they changed the word to meaning outlaw vampire. So these guys literally just match the description of a European vampire, but they're like on the run from the church in Europe. So they went to Madagascar, and what they do is they sneak into the service of royal families and drink their blood. And royal families like to have them because of their pale white skin.
Good. Fuck the bourgeois. Get him.
So it literally is like white vampires running from Europe, being the only white people in the country, and they would sneak into royal families and kill the royal family by drinking their blood.
Good. Yeah. Fuck 'em. Fuck the rich people. Fuck 'em.
So yeah, I mean that's kind of cool. I like this idea of like these vampires down their luck, so they run to Africa. I think it's very cool. I want to see a movie about that. Legit, it'd be cool.
That would be sick. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're right. That'd be a great premise for a movie.
Especially like modern day. Like he's like from a fancy vampire society that gets like taken out by like secret vampire hunters. He's like on the run. He's living in like now like Madagascar, which not a great place. So it's just like down on his luck, finding his success in Madagascar. I don't know.
Yeah,
Could be cool.
and then he has a cousin that lives in New York City.
And they become that's a sequel.
Yeah.
New York. Speaking of New York City, we're going to go to America now. The Americas.
The only country that
The
matters.
only one that matters, and the focal point of this. No, it's not the focal point of this. So we're going to stop at the island of Trinidad, and we're going to talk about the Suicuivant, which is an old woman by day, but at night rips their flesh off to reveal that their true form is a fireball,
Oh, cool.
who seeks isolated people to drink their blood. Those who die from this become a Suicuivant themselves. So, very vampire-y. Except the fireball part. But
Fuck it, yeah, I'm super into that. The fire vampire. Whee!
it's crazy. The Puchen of the Mapuche people, Puchen, maybe, I don't know, Peuchen, if you want to look it up, of the Mapuche in Chile, is a giant blood-sucking snake who can disguise themselves as a human sometimes to lure in victims. The Quijuatito, I believe how you say it, is a skeletal-faced Aztec mythological spirit who is the spirit of those who died during childbirth. They steal children and drive the living mad via sexual intercourse. It is implied that they drink the blood of the children that they take.
Fucking love. Oh my god, they love this like anti-sex, anti-children.
So I think the anti-sex thing is an anti-female sex thing, like a lot of history says.
Oh yeah,
because it says
on the woman.
Yeah, it says dying in childbirth. I'm assuming it means mothers, not babies, especially if they're having sexual intercourse. So I think it's the idea that the moms who died during childbirth are like, you're a woman who wants to have sex, you're a monster kind of thing.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. It's that. When men want to have sex, it's like, well, it's just the urge, it's nature, it's natural. But when a woman wants to have sex, you're insane.
Well, to be fair, a lot of these cultures did say that deviant, sex-hungry men were vampires. So, there's that.
Right. Yeah, there was that. Oh wait, we're in that time where everything was a sin.
Yeah, everything was a sin. So,
Dark Ages really fucked everything up.
So going more north into our home country, North America, our home continent, I should say, we have its own. Well, I mean, I guess where United States of America is now, I should say.
I know.
Had its own 18th, 19th century vampire hysteria moment. The term vampire wasn't used as much, but it was seen in some papers. There's the case of Mercy Brown. Do you know about this? Because you're from the East Coast, New England area?
Nope, I don't know this.
Mercy Brown is a woman who was accused of being a vampire in 18th century Rhode Island. This was due to this.
We don't give a fuck about Rhode Island people.
This was now 100% confirmed to be the spread of tuberculosis. At the time called consumption. So people were dying in a family. The Brown family was all getting sick and dying, obviously, of tuberculosis, but they were convinced because they were so healthy before, the sickness couldn't just strike out of nowhere. And it had to be a vampire who was the first one who died, which was Mercy Brown. So her body was dug up, her heart was removed, her liver was removed, and they were burned, and the ash was put back where it was in the body, which is how you kill a vampire, and as well as give it a still good Quaker burial.
Quaker. It's very important to get the Quaker burial.
Yeah. So there you go. That's our North America part. There's not any really Native American stories of vampires, but there is, crawlers, which we covered, and skinwalkers who do drink blood. So, there's that. Go listen to that episode called National Parks if you want to learn more about that.
One of the, probably chapter, one of our best.
One of my favorites. Probably definitely my favorite episode, actually. So now we're going to go to Asia, which has its fair share of stories. In the Philippines, Malaysia, Cambodia, and Indonesia, we have stories of basically the same monster. They have different names, but they're most commonly known as the Mandurugo in Tagalog, which translates to bloodsucker. And this is a monster who appears to be an attractive girl by day, but at night grows wings and has a long proboscis-like tongue, and sucks the fetuses off of sick pregnant women.
Jesus Christ! Some of these are wild.
Yeah,
A vampire mosquito.
a monster bug woman who likes to drink fetuses off people, not blood. So yeah, that's kind of a cool monster. There's a couple other ones, but we're gonna go not too much detail of that. They're not very vampire-y, just kind of monstery, like a woman who tears herself into pieces to throw at you. It's weird.
My life into pieces. Sorry, go ahead.
We go to Japan, which there is a spirit who is a snake woman called the Nure who is said to drink blood. Now, you know about Japanese vampires?
Yeah, that's fucking on Snake Way when Goku's going to King Kai.
Yeah. But no, I'm talking about like outside of this snake woman thing, which isn't really a vampire, to be clear. It drinks blood that is offered to it, not out of desire.
It likes consensual blood. That's nice.
So Japanese vampires are very popular. There's a bunch of animes. There's a bunch of movies and stuff, live action movies about vampires in Japan, but they're not real. They made up their own mythos in the 50s for vampires in Japan.
That's awesome.
Because of the popularity of vampire movies. And this mythos has spread into a lot of people. Even Japanese people think it's real mythology of Japanese history.
Wow, really?
They think it's like a Shinto mythology thing, but it's not. It's a movie. It's a Hollywood thing that is very heavily based on our vampires of the West and the Chinese vampires called the Jiangshi, which are the ones with the tag on their forehead that you've probably seen.
Oh, yeah.
That's Chinese. And you see that a lot in Japan, too. They just took that from that culture, from the Chinese culture, and then took the modern style of vampire and mixed them together, which is fine. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think it's wild. I thought it was a real thing in their mythology, and I looked into it.
It's like a Shazam situation when we all got convinced there was a movie called Kazam or Shazam or whatever.
Yeah, we thought it was called. Yeah, we thought Sinbad was in Kazam or something. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, it's like, no, dude, it was called Kazam and it was Shaquille O'Neal.
But there was a lot of articles online when I was looking it up about how it's not real and like there's no vampires or Shintoism. It's just this one spirit that drinks blood offerings. That's the closest thing to it.
That's so funny.
So yeah, now we're gonna go to China for our last part of vampires around the world. Which known around the world as Chinese vampires. They're actually called the Jiangshi. And in ancient China, people had the preference of being buried in their hometown. That was a big part of Chinese life.
That's pretty normal, yeah.
Yeah. So when a person died in a foreign land, what the family would have to do is hire a sorcerer. Which, to be just, if you don't know, in China, sorcery is not seen as evil back then. It was just a profession. People were professional sorcerers. They were usually like anything from fortune tellers to actual doctors who we seen as sorcerers. Like they would use actual medicine. And they would just be sorcerers, but they would do stuff like they would do both. Like they would do a spell, but part of the spell for your wound was putting aloe on it. You know what I mean? Like that's like kind of how it worked out. So people just thought like, oh, the magic's real because it is kind of in this sense. Doesn't have to do with the spell tag they put on your arm, but it does have to do with the aloe vera they put in your arm.
Yeah, for sure.
So they would hire these sorcerers, and what these sorcerers would do is they would travel to the person's death site, locate the corpse, dig it up, write the spell tag, which would usually have the person's name, birthplace, and birthday on it, and they would put the tag on the corpse's face, which the corpse would then get up and reanimate itself under the sorcerer's control.
Oh, cool. Yeah, this is totally normal science.
Yeah, so this walking corpse, known as a Jiangshi, would follow the sorcerer around and be led back to its hometown to be buried. Usually they had to travel long distances for this, so what they would do is they would get multiple people like Jiangshi at once. You know, they'd be like, oh, there was a war out here, I'm going to get all these families, guys. So they would they would come back with a bunch of bodies at once and get everyone to do this.
That must be scary to see, though, to seeing an army of dead people walking.
Yeah, exactly. But with the spell tag, they're safe. But what would happen if the Jiangshi was denied payment? He would remove the spell tag, and now this creature is wild, and it would run around eating the villagers and drinking their blood to restore its former self.
Oh, that's kind of cool, though. That's a really cool story. I
like that story. Yeah, it's a cool little thing.
Really awesome.
And the best part is the real history of the fact, because I did find an article all about Zhang-Chi and all about like what actually probably happened. And it was just like, so carts, right? Very expensive to have a cart, especially an animal-pulled ox cart at the time. And sorcerers weren't paid well, so they would save up for a cart, or they would take people's prepayments for finding their bodies and bringing them back in a cart, and he would just bring them back in a cart and then lay them out and say, "I got all your dead walking over here, but because I didn't want to scare you guys, they're just laying down in a field over here."
Yeah, we wanted to make sure that everybody felt comfortable with this transaction.
Yeah, so they wouldn't scare people with the Walking Dead, so we'd put them back down. Cool, kind of a cool little realistic part of that story.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, that's the end of the vampires around the world, which brings us to our last part, the vampires of today. Which I want to go over some things first, which is things I love. Firstly, a vampire myth that the church used to get a lot of money. Vampires don't have reflections, right? That's a known thing that the church spread around. Right. Do you know why? Because they gave a reason.
Because light doesn't shine off of them?
Because mirrors back in the day were made with silver, and silver reflects. Silver reflects yourself over behind the glass, and people who are, silver's a holy metal. It's blessed.
Right.
So people would look at this unholy vampire creature, would see this, and they would have to like not have a reflection because they're unholy, right? In the holy metal. So the church, what they decided to do, they said, "Hey, what you should do, because silver's holy, not gold. Silver's like blessed gold, so it's more valuable than gold. So give us all your gold.
Give us your gold." Yeah, go ahead.
And keep silver. That makes sense, right? Because the silver's holy, so you're going to be safe with that. You don't need gold. It's less valuable. It's not blessed by God.
Dude, silver is literally a force field against this shit. You give me your gold, I'll give it. Yeah, it's all good.
I just put the thumbnail for the episode on the screen.
I can see the giant bald head there for a second.
I love the two different vampire types. So
yeah,
we have that, right? So they give us another one that I wanted to talk about is garlic. I love the garlic story. You know why vampires are afraid of garlic?
Because it's actually very good for you. I highly recommend everybody who's listening to this on YouTube or Twitch right now, add some more garlic to your diet. And I mean real garlic, not garlic paste. I'm talking about the good shit. But go ahead, why?
That's what the vampires thought too. It's a trick, Pat. No one ever said that garlic is bad is bad against vampires, except for people who were accused of being vampires. Because what does garlic do but thin your blood, making it all the easier to drink?
Oh, so garlic is a fucking red herring.
It's a trick. People wear garlic and eat it because they think the vampire will be afraid of them, but in fact, it's so pungent, and with the vampire's enhanced smell, they smell the garlic on you, so they know you have thinner blood, and you're easier to drink.
Oh. So I'm fucked, because I haven't had garlic in a little while, I guess.
I mean, garlic's so good. Everyone should suffer from this. It's great. So I wanted to go over those two things about like modern vampire myths that I thought were very cool.
That is cool.
The church loved to get money, rob people their money by lying about metal values. So most vampires that we know today from books and movies and stuff are like, probably, I would say vampire is the most popular monster in our lexicon, right?
Yeah.
Of media, at least. Like, I think, everyone knows, like, oh, a vampire, yeah.
Yeah. That's probably why you have just as many people who are over and roll their eyes at vampires as you do people who are obsessed with them.
Yeah, 100%.
That's when you know something's at the top, is because half the people are like, oh my God, I don't care.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Haters mean it's popular. So a good place to start looking at some modern vampires is The Source of the Fame, the 1897 novel by Bram Stoker, Dracula. And there is, which you brought up earlier at the beginning of this episode, a historical part of Dracula. So we're going to go over that, which was in 1431 Transylvania. We saw the birth of Vlad III, a.k.a. Vlad Tepes, the son of Vlad II, who was the king of Wallachia. Vlad II was a member of the Order of the Dragon. This is a Christian imperial order that earned him the surname of Dragon. So he would have that be his full name. So his name would be called Vlad Dracul. That's how you would translate that. His son would be caught and trapped and imprisoned and raised by the Ottomans, and who they were at war with, and under a fake peace deal. They would capture the son. And in captivity, he earned the nickname Son of the Dragon, which translated to Dracula.
Ah, son of a dragon.
He would be better known as later as Vlad the Impaler, but the nickname, along with a few other traits of his, such as boiling blood to make people sick, dipping his bread in human blood and to eat in front of the enemy during peace negotiations, are pretty pretty inspiring to the character we know today.
Holy shit! That's not a peace negotiation. That's I swear to fucking God, if you ever think about doing this again, this will be your fucking blood.
Yeah,
that's
100%. And so allegedly, it was the blood of their soldiers. Before the fight, before the negotiations, he would kill a prisoner, fill the bowl with the blood, and then eat bread while the guy was talking to him, dipping it in the blood.
Does blood have is blood high in protein or
I think it is high in iron.
Right, that makes sense.
It probably does. I mean, I guess it would depend on the diet of the person too, but
fair. Yeah.
He was a pretty gross person. I'm not going to go too much about Vlad the Impaler, but yeah, he would impale people. He would put a pole through your asshole that would come out, or your vagina that would come out your mouth, and he liked to use blunted poles so it wouldn't rip the organs. It would crush and push them, which let you live longer impaled.
Right. I was going to say a lot of people even lived for a few minutes totally and fully impaled.
Yeah. So there's stories of a bunch of people who would live hours, but we now realize that they're just probably twitching bodies.
Yeah. It was probably anything, it was 5 minutes.
Yeah. You couldn't live long like that. Yeah. Horrifying person. Vlad the Impaler.
Awful.
Did some great, terrible things.
And his mom made him great. Right.
He was feared by enemies, loved by people though, because he was very good at killing enemies. He hated the Ottomans.
That's
with a
right.
passion.
Yeah, the people around him loved him because he did it for his country or whatever.
Yeah, he was a very pro-Christian thing. He was taken captive by Ottomans as a kid, so he fucking hated them with a passion. That's where all that hate came from. Is he just directed everything at the Ottomans. Modern day Turkey, But yeah, so let's talk about 2022 and vampires. People think they exist still as a cryptid. It's a common. True. People do believe vampires exist, partially due to how much they just are prevalent in history.
Right.
Which we kind of talked about why that's not the case. But anyway, people do believe they exist, and we actually had a local incident in May of this year, Pat. I don't know if you heard about this, but I did. So in
Los Angeles?
Yeah, so I bookmarked it, and I used the report. I'm not going to say the names live because of location issues, but you can probably find it if you Google it. Sure. In Los Angeles, 2022 of May, a woman who worked at a bar had a regular who visited almost every single day for a couple of weeks. He was very young, he was very attractive, and he would talk to her a couple times, just light talk, right? And she was a bartender, and he stared at her one night at the eye without saying anything, and she felt compelled to go outside without him saying anything to her, which, for the record, there is camera footage to back this. She goes outside, waits by her car, and then the man comes out to see her at his car. This part is not on camera, but what happened is allegedly he opened his mouth, revealing fangs, to which a person who also happened to walk the corner at the time saw and screamed, and that person's boyfriend jumped the parking lot fence and tried to jump the guy to get off with the girl. And this guy who was allegedly revealing fangs jumped over the car and then ran into the night and was never seen again.
Wait, this happened when? May?
May, yeah.
Holy shit.
So yeah, that happened in Los Angeles. There's a police report about it. That's it. That's the end. There's no investigation. You know what I mean? There's nothing else. It's just that's the end of it. Never seen again. But yeah, weird little thing that happened. There's a couple other reports around the world of stuff like that, but that was a very recent one. So I figured that would be a good one to throw down. There's also a vampire bar in Los Angeles.
Well, that's a little on the nose.
I'm not talking about role-playing vampires. I'm talking about people who actually drink blood at the bar. Because there's a group of people that claim to be real-life vampires today, and it is a community that claim that if they don't drink blood, they become extremely ill.
Well, there is some kind of sickness I know, or like something or other, but I don't think it's.
So doctors have examined these people. This has been looked into. There is nothing about that that's true, according to doctors physically.
Right. Well, for them, I don't believe it, but
Yeah, they physically say, the doctors who examine people say there's nothing physically requiring them to drink blood, so it might be a mental condition. I
think the physical thing is like you don't drink it, you just get an IV back.
Yeah, well, it's just like they're not lacking.
Yeah.
Is what doctors are saying. There is no reason you need blood. Is what they're saying. Like you're fine.
Yeah. Your bones make it.
And then there's people. These people also claim sometimes they don't need to drink blood. They just need to absorb the energy of others, Pat. And that's where we go into the I get what kind of people these are now.
Yeah.
And there's communities of them out there. They do charity work a lot. They do stuff like that, but they don't talk about what they do because people will be freaked out. But I guess they do drink blood in modern day. But
if they can shorten my life but make it a really amazing one, then we'll talk.
Yeah, if you're the Laman Say or whatever of Isle of Man, hit Pat up.
Yeah.
Hit
me up. I don't mind dying at 50 if that means I have a banger of the next 20 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, you could die tomorrow, so why not try,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the end of the episode for vampires today.
Wowie zowie, what a time.
They're kind of like a cryptid
Thanks,
today.
Alice.
So just if you like cryptids,
I had fun.
Look
Tonight
into
was
it.
really fun.
Yeah. It's a good. I'm glad we got vampires done. A lot of people were asking for it. I had requests.
You got to give the people what they want.
So I'm glad that people can now listen to my vampire rantings, and hopefully you learn a little bit about vampires and what they are, where they come from.
Right. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful time today. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening, guys. Have a good bloody night.
Ha!